Hello, everyone. My name is Andres Felipe Zapata Palacio. I'm Senior Data Scientist at AI and the main developer of this building block, Distributed Data Visualizer. And today I will give you specific instructions to integrate it in your existing solutions. So before starting, we have some prerequisites. The first one is downloading the building block. You must go to the official repository of the Distributed Data Visualizer, and in the section of releases, you can access the latest stable version and download it from the section in the assets. So you will find a zip file. Once you have it in your local machine, you will open it, and there you will find this ptx.ddb.js file. This JavaScript file contains the implementation of the building block, and it's served as a JavaScript library. Once you have this file ready, you must serve it in your own premises. The idea of taking the responsibility of serving it in the way that you prefer is to reduce the latency and ensure that the service will be available for your organization and accessible to your solution. So you can decide if you isolate it in a private environment or you make it accessible to the internet. You can host it in your own server or in your own premises using a web server. At the end, you must have this type of URL that will determine the location of the resource. Once you have this URL, you are ready to start with the procedure. So the step number one is loading the building block using a script tag in your web page or in your solution. This script will have the URL that we defined previously in the source attribute. Step number two is defining the structure of the rules. Rules is a JSON object that defines the structure of the visualization. So it defines the order in which each visualization will be rendered, its content, its data, titles, button titles, and also some other visual properties or visual configurations, like the font size, the font family, and the background color. If you want to know more about the expected format of this rules JSON object, you can go to the official repository of the building block, and in the section of documentation, you will find a file that is called data formats. In the file, you will find a section that is called configuration file of the distributed data visualizer rules.json. If you go to this, you will find all the specific requirements for the formatting and all the capabilities and limitations that this rules JSON object has. Once you have that configured, you must add a div tag in your web page or in your solution, and you must specify a unique identifier. For this case, for this example, we will call it DDB, but it can have any name. The important thing is that this ID is unique in your web page. So using this ID, in the next step, the program will be able to detect where should the visualization be rendered in your website. You don't need to define anything else more than the unique ID and this div tag. Place it in the exact location where you want to render the visualization. You can decide if you add extra styling options to this div, but we also have automatized process to configure it in a way that it's responsive. Once you have this div tag placed in your website, you must define the 5 lines of code that will be executed. As you can see, this is JavaScript code. So the first line contains the rules that we define in the step number 2, and it is defined as a JSON object. After that, you will create an instance of the visualization object, and in the constructor, you will find the rules that we define. After that, we'll we will attach the visualization, specifying which will be the exact element that will be used for the rendering. In this case, is the div with the unique ID DDB. But again, if you define a different ID for your div tag, make sure that it also corresponds to the ID that you specify in this part of the code. This step is completely optional. As I mentioned before, this is just an automatized process that will define the styling of the div that you defined as a parent for the visualization. And it will configure all the styling in a way that if the width or the height change in this external div, all the elements in the visualization will readjust their size to match the new size of the div. This is an optional step. You can be completely under control of the visual configuration, and you can define all the style properties by yourself. But make sure to try this feature, because in most of the cases, it will work very well and will save a lot of work in your site. Finally, we will call the refresh function that will make sure that all the elements in the visualization are correctly placed and configured. This is how it looks, the final result. So in this case, you can see that we have three types of visualizations. One is course or training recommendations, skills profile, and job recommendations. In this case, course recommendations is active, and there is an extra window that shows the details of the first recommendation. Here you can see an example of a skills profile visualization where you can interact with the different skills in the profile and see the relationships between them. An important note, the asset that is delivered in the repository, that JS file that you can download, is optimized in a way that it works and fits with the browser. So it's made to be imported in the front end of your website. In case that you want to integrate this code directly in your code implementation, which means adding it as a module, as a part of your Node.js implementation, you need to build an optimized version for that by following the instructions that you can find in the official repository of the building block. In the README, you will find a section that is called building instructions, and there you will find the exact command that you need to execute in order to build an optimized version for Node.js. But it is highly probable that you don't need to perform this, because most of the use cases only require to load the building block as part of the front end, which is simply enough with loading the script with the script tag and executing the 4 or 5 lines of code that we just saw in the previous step. So these are all the required steps to integrate the building block in your existing website or solution.